I'm Aryeh Schwartz, along with my co-host, Rachel Galligan, and welcome to the Winsidr show, where it's all about the W. Today, the Liberty have a new head coach, and we're talking about it. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. The Liberty hired Walt Hopkins, former Lynx assistant coach, as their new head coach. And we're going to also tease a little bit of free agency stuff, but let's hop right into it. No messing around. Rachel, welcome to the show, and give me your initial thoughts of the Liberty hiring Walt.
Well, first off, thank you for having me on however many numbers of episodes we've done, but I'm happy to be back. I hope everybody is having a fantastic start to 2020. We're a little over a weekend and we've got quite a bit happening already. And I think, as you ask me the question about the hiring of Walt Hopkins to the Liberty, there's been a ton of obvious news that's been going around about potential names being tossed around for this hire. I know they did an extensive search and we talked about 4 or 5 specific names in particular that people had interviewed and could be potential fits. But I think through the course of that entire process, regardless of all the, tireless work that a lot of the media members had put into kind of figuring out who they were narrowing down, Walt was kind of the constant, if you will. And I think his name has been up in conversation, a few times now, which is not, I guess my first reaction is I'm not surprised. And I don't know if I'm not surprised because we've just talked about him a lot within this last year, or if I'm just not surprised because, he's been at the forefront of a lot of these articles and things that people are talking about. But I am a little bit surprised. I think that it's an exciting hire. I think for the fact of extending that women's basketball coaching tree, especially within the WNBA, extending it to a fresh new face, a fresh new name, a younger, type of generation of coach that is coming into this next era of women's basketball. I think it's really exciting. I think this is a tremendous opportunity for Walt. Him coming from spending 3 years with arguably one of the WNBA's most prestigious coaches in Cheryl Reeve and being able to learn under her and coach some of the best players in the league and win a championship. I mean, that's you can't put a price tag on that. His experience in Minnesota and working under Cheryl Reeve is why he has this position. But I think, if you really step back and dive into his resume a little bit, it's very interesting. And I'm going to be completely honest, before we started these conversations about the Liberty coaching opening, I didn't know much about Walt. And so after diving in and kind of looking at his resume, honestly, there's not a ton of WNBA experience there. We're talking about 4 years, 3 years with the Lynx and 1 year back with Tulsa as player development. And then before that, you're talking about a little bit of college academic coach, director of basketball operations experience, but only, a couple of years within that. So it is a little bit shocking. And I'm not trying to knock him in any way, because again, I think that getting a fresh new face and building that coaching tree within the WNBA is such a thing that is much needed right now. We see a lot of recycled names, if you will, and that sounds really harsh because I'm not trying to knock anybody, but it is nice to see kind of a new name come up and just kind of an unknown as to what Walt can do as a coach and what he's going to bring to the Liberty. And I think it's exciting. I'm excited. I think it's a great hire for them. I think someone young being able to reach this Liberty squad makes a ton of sense to me. So overall, I think it's a great hire. I was just a little bit surprised by the lack of full-on experience he had.
And you know what? If anybody actually listens to these, I don't know if they do, but we may or may not, hint, hint, be having the young man join our show in the next few days. So stay tuned. But no, I completely agree with you. I mean, I think if we want to talk the biggest knocks to this hire, because I think no matter what, until look, let's be real, until 2-3 years down the road, we're not going to be able to give a full analysis on this hire because, first season, maybe it's not that great. And then next season is amazing. And then he's the greatest coach in league history for however long. All you can do is kind of base it on what is on paper now. And like you said, he doesn't have the craziest amount of experience. He does have a wide experience in a variety of different fields that, could assist him in being a really good coach. So I think that there's definitely that upside. But if you're talking about negatives, I'd say he's young. He's not, like you were saying, one of the recycled names, but that's also obviously a positive. He only has 4 seasons in this league as an assistant coach or a player development coach. People also, one of the knocks that I've heard a lot with this has been that he isn't a splash hire. And that I actually disagree with. Not that I think he's a splash hire. I think he kind of is, just in the sense of what you just spoke about. He doesn't have that same name recognition that like all of us are like, oh, we know so much about him, whatever. But the argument on the flip side is like, oh, Coach T, little T, as I like to call him, Eric, he would have been a splash hire. And that's the part that I disagree with, just because I just think if you're an assistant coach, you are unproven. And until you get a shot, hopefully this doesn't happen, but a head coach goes down with an injury or something, or has to step aside for a little bit, and then an assistant coach steps in, or you get that position as an assistant coach, or they fire someone mid-season and you step in. Other than that, you don't really have an opportunity to prove yourself on this level. So I don't think there necessarily could have been a splash hire in this. And, Walt hits a splash hire in a different style. My biggest concern in regard to this team and this roster and just him as a head coach and whatnot is a lot of the positives I've heard about him is he's the quote-unquote guard whisperer. I believe High Post Hoops had a nice article about him, calling him a guard whisperer and blah, blah, blah. And for me, I'm just scratching my head a little bit. And this isn't a knock to him. This isn't a knock to the Lynx. But I just don't think the Lynx guard play the past 2 years was really that impressive that I would stand here and say, wow, he's a guard whisperer. I mean, I've been very vocal about D-Rob. Odyssey Sims had a great season. And also, I just think that she kind of just blossomed because she was finally given that green light to do Odyssey things. On the flip side, there was growth on the bench, so I will give him credit on that. I guess I'm just not a huge fan of that narrative. But you look at this roster, my biggest issue with the Liberty roster for a long time is they have not had a true point guard to kind of run their offense.
Yeah, well, I think to combat your point about the guard whisper, and kind of everything that's been going on with Minnesota, I mean, you can't deny the fact that the Lynx have undergone drastic changes, in the last couple of years. We're talking about one of the most dominant franchises in the history of the WNBA, who have now lost arguably the best player in the league, a bunch of changes that way. So I think it's hard to really gauge what could have been, what might have been his level of guard development, unless we're truly in those settings, we're in those practice settings, we're getting a better idea as to kind of how that dynamic works. I hear what you're saying. I definitely respect that for sure. I think the thing that excites me the most about Walt after really doing my research on him is, first off, he's an extremely educated man. He holds like 2 masters from Harvard and, extremely educated from an aspect of the psychology, and the ability to build relationships and to get into players' minds and knows what it takes to kind of build a winning culture. And he's coming from a winning culture. That's all that the Minnesota Lynx have been for many years, even though they have fallen victim to, a serious amount of change the last couple of years, but they've still been able to make the playoffs and be successful. So I think, where the Liberty is at right now is a team that's probably, obviously struggled. They have forgotten how to win. They struggle how to win. You might have some players who could be beaten down mentally. You could have some friction. When teams are winning or losing as much as the Liberty has lost the last few years, a locker room can become toxic. A lot of those things, it starts to just brew in a cesspool of negativity and all that. And I'm not saying that's necessarily the case. And that's definitely not, I'm not knocking anybody in particular. I'm just saying that the Liberty are in need of some of that psychological chemistry, cultural building type of environment. And from what I'm reading, that's what I hear he's fantastic with. And I think that's an exciting thing and a breath of fresh air into this organization. It might take some time, like you said, this first year, maybe it increases a little bit. You start getting just some fresh looks and some fresh energy and a new type of face within the organization. It's amazing what that can do just amongst the players. But for me, that's the most exciting part for the Liberty and kind of where they've been at these last couple of years with the amount that they've lost. Walt being a breath of fresh air that really knows how to build up that winning culture.
Yeah, no, I agree. And one other thing that I just hate certain narratives. This has nothing to do with Walt, but everyone liked to knock Katie Smith not knock Katie Smith, but give her a pass on, the arena was bad. Like they were up in West, wherever it was. Westchester. Whatever. It's in the past. But I just don't understand. Everyone always like say like, she, crappy ownership. I agree. That's definitely something that hampered her ability to coach and a variety of other things. I just wouldn't put the arena as a reason why the team underperformed. So I've been trying to get that out there for a while. I just had to get it out there.
I agree. I agree with that. Just real quick, this point, It's a little bit unfortunate for Katie Smith because she entered the Liberty organization at a time that was unfortunate. I'll just go ahead and say it like that. They were the ugly stepchild of the WNBA and kind of the forgotten about, you just kind of felt like, about it, the whole thing. Well, now here we are entering 2020, the new ownership, the new arena, first round draft pick, all these things that have fallen into place. This is in my opinion, the most exciting franchise in the WNBA in terms of the potential of what could be. And it went like that overnight, it felt like, just from kind of like this, to holy crap, this could be something incredible. And that's just timing, it's just reality. It is what it is. It's no one's specific fault. But no, I agree with you. The fact that they played in Westchester is not an excuse as to why they underperformed, and that shouldn't be the case at all. I just think it's an unfortunate kind of just era of kind of when things took place and when Katie Smith was there, and what the cards she had to deal with are different than the cards that Walt now has in his hands. It's just a completely different scenario.
Completely agree. One other spotlight on Walt before we move on to free agency. Something I thought that was really cool that he mentioned in his presser that I don't know had gone public before, but he coached Gabby Williams in high school in Vegas, which I thought was really cool.
That's a fun fact.
Yeah, right. Fun fact. So, but all right, moving on to free agency. The key here, because one of the key elements of free agency in the WNBA is the core tag. And we're not speaking about core tag. We're kind of ignoring that. And I know a lot of the naysayers will say, but initial reports of the CBA state that the core tag is still going to be involved. I get that, but just in case something else doesn't, we're just ignoring the core tag when we talk about this. And I'm just going to run down the list. There's a lot of other free agents, and it took us a lot of hard work to get this list of free agents. But I just want to run down a couple people who jumped off the list in my mind. If Rachel has any thoughts on them, she'll pop up. Angel McCoughtry, obviously, she's been pretty vocal about wanting to test free agency and wanting to see what's out there. I think she could be a great addition to basically any team in the league. The real question is the obvious. Does she look for a championship this late in her career? She's kind of carried a team to a championship, I believe, 3 times. Does she want to kind of go to a team where she can just be icing on the cake in addition to something? A lot of places that could be a good fit for her in that regard. A couple other players, Courtney Vandersloot and Allie Quigley. I think we obviously think that they're going back to Chicago. Got James Wade. You got that young team. They've both decided multiple times in their career that they want to stay in Chicago, so I think that's an obvious one. Keeping with the Sky, Stephanie Dolson. Now, this show has harped on Stephanie Dolson a good amount. The main reason I put her on the list, because I don't think she's necessarily on the same level as some of the other players on this list, but I have never seen her as a great fit for the Chicago Sky team. And honestly, I think she could be a good backup on a variety of other WNBA teams. So just want to throw her out there. She is a free agent. Skylar Diggins-Smith, obviously, that is a what?
There could be some changes there. I'm anxious to see.
Yeah, she's an interesting one. And look, A lot of people smacked me before saying, oh, Skylar had this great season. She can't, top it. And then the next season she topped it. So she's a player that I never doubt on. Glory Johnson, a beast, add that to any team. That's good. TRP showed a lot more of a resurgence of the TRP that we know from starting in her career. And then she kind of faltered a little bit in her later years in Washington. Beard, the greatest defensive player in WNBA history, up there with Tamika Catchings. She's a free agent, obviously late in her career. She's probably going to stay in LA. Sydney Colson, somebody who has bounced around a good amount and really showed up as a big step player for the Aces this past season. Keep your eyes on her. Tina Charles, obviously, fits in with New York. Walt's number one priority has got to be to keep her. Dwana Bonner, I think, has got to be probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, compared to one more person on this list. But Dwana Bonner is a huge name. You know me, last season I had her as my early season MVP. Leilani Mitchell, who has been a beast of recent for the Mercury, is also somebody who could, maybe we see a Renee Montgomery-esque situation there where she signs with a new team and gets a bigger role and gets a role where she gets to showcase her skill a little bit more. Staying with the Mercury, Essence Carson, always keep your eyes on her. She's got a few good years left in her. Now moving on to Washington, where they have their three biggest players are all free agents. Elena Deladon, I think it's obvious she's staying unless a team moves closer to Delaware. Emma Miesemann, who is probably, with Dwana Bonner, the biggest name of free agency. And Washington is going to do whatever they can to keep her. And Chrissy Tolliver, who's obviously on the downswing of her career, but yet again, big player, big-time shots. Other than that, Simone Augustus obviously is going to be back in Minnesota. Brittany Griner made it clear she's staying in Phoenix, and Sue Bird has made it clear that, well, in the past, that she's staying in Seattle, and I don't know why in God's green earth she would leave Seattle. So, sorry we just rushed through that. That's just a few players. Just give you a little tease. We're going to be doing more deep dives, more discussions on that. Going to get Rachel, force her to make some hot takes. And it's going to be a fun little free agency period. And one last note, as I do at the end of every episode, until I've been informed that they have hired one or that I am wrong and I need to shut up. The Fever need a PR person. Somebody.
Yeah.
Please.
Call me.
And yeah, there you go. Rachel loves Indiana. She loves the weather. She loves Tamika Catchings. And she loves Marion Stanley. So come on, bring her in. Well, as we always say, we believe the players of the W and its community deserve the same in-depth analysis and respect that men's sports receive on a daily basis. With that in mind, please consider joining our Patreon community to help support us and the hard work that we do. Peace out, Rachel.